Call on the minutes, and I will be kept right as to what minutes we have to approve. Okay, we'll move to the Procedure Committee. Michael Mayer will keep us right here.
Moderator, Mayor 494. A brief reminder to all those who are serving on the Selection Committee that there will be a meeting today in the Senate Room at 1 o'clock. The Senate Room is down the stairs into the quad and across it into the archway of New College, and while in the arch, turn to the right and you'll find the Senate Room. Today's pastoral care will be provided by the Reverend Dr. John Cowie, and John is available in the usual ways. A note to our online commissioners, could you please ensure that your name and number is appearing in your Zoom name? This ensures that when you wish to make a contribution, our technical people can find you with ease and confidence. For those in the hall, iPads are located around the room for you to use to register to speak. You can do this either online on the hub or at these iPads. They are fairly intuitive, I can promise you, and they help the moderator to plan contributions and how to deal with a debate. If you feel lost, please just wave. Neil McLennan, who is sitting here, will make sure that you are not lost, or we from the top table will assist you as well. May I thank all commissioners for the helpful and careful way with which they engaged in the discussion around assisted dying yesterday. Some commissioners have asked to register their dissent to the agreed motion. Papers to do this can be found under the portrait of Queen Victoria's chaplains. Those online can email pcoffice@churchofscotland.org.uk and should make reference to Standing Order 65 in doing so. The Procedure Committee have met and present to the Assembly how the Faith Action Programme leadership team will report to the Assembly today. The convener will have a 10-minute speech to outline the work of the committee and the aims of the deliverance as a whole. We will then move to questions as we do, but questions will then be answered by the convener of whichever programme group the question sits within. As we progress through the report, when we arrive at the sections of deliverance which pertain to each programme board's work, the convener of that board will have a 5-minute speech. This will ensure that the Assembly is best informed and has the information it requires to effectively deal with the report and supplementary report of FAPLT. There are conveners and secretaries available in the Martin Hall today. Today this includes the Committee on Chaplains to His Majesty's Forces, the Guild, the General Trustees, the Housing and Loan Fund, and the Nomination Committee. Tonight is the Guild Beg Sing here in the General Assembly Hall. You are welcome to join them for an evening of praise through hymns and readings and prayers. They promise an excellent evening. The event starts at 7 p.m. and it is free to attend. You will be sure of a warm welcome. Yesterday, we reminded the report and sections of deliverance of the Ecumenical Relations Committee. We propose to deal with this report at the start of session 15, which comes tomorrow on Wednesday. Finally, moderator, I remind all that yesterday we altered the length of speeches to 3 minutes, and this is unchanged. A bell rings very close to that time, maybe 5 seconds before the 3 minutes are up. Commissioners should use that time to finish the sentence that they are speaking and then return to their seat. Moderator, I thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm sure that's all noted.
Moderator, thank you. The minute for Saturday is printed on, published on pages 40 to 49 of the Assembly paper, and we ask for the Assembly's approval of that minute, please. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. I call on the report and the supplementary report of the Faith Action Programme leadership team and the convener. Tommy McNeill.
Moderator and friends, I wonder what you're like in life when you have an appointment that you're not looking forward to, but you know you have to attend it. Maybe you have a doctor's appointment that's concerning you, or a visit to the dentist in the diary, or maybe the car's in the garage for an essential repair and you're dreading the bill. For such moments in life, we can know anxiety and have a sense of foreboding. Our heart as FAPLT is to make real, visible, tangible, and living the vision of the Church of Scotland, which is to inspire the people of Scotland and beyond with the good news of Jesus Christ through enthusiastic, worshipping, witnessing, nurturing, and serving communities. How do we do this when we don't have the heart? When we have more questions than answers, more challenges than opportunities? As one member of FAPLT put it, we face the challenge as a church of needing to offer palliative care whilst at the same time providing midwifery services. Truth be told, the moment we're in as a church, as a denomination, is bigger than we are. What's the point of what I'm saying? As a church, we're living and serving in the midst of crisis. As such, we're living in what can feel like a continual state of anxiety and foreboding. Someone older and much wiser than me gave me this advice. If you don't know what to pray or don't feel like praying, read the Psalms until you find your voice and pray that. Given the acute moment we're in, I'm going to follow this advice, but not finding our moment in the Psalms, but by considering a remarkable moment in the life of Jesus, a time where he had his own crisis of faith, struggling with the weight of today and even more with what tomorrow held. Jesus said in Gethsemane, "My soul is overwhelmed to the point of death." Gethsemane means oil press. It's reckoned it was an olive garden, and to produce oil, the olives would be pressed and crushed until they broke and released the oil within them. This garden was a place of mental and spiritual anguish. For me, as convener of FAPLT, I don't think it's too much to say that for us as a church, we're in our own Gethsemane moment. Like Jesus, we can ask, Father, is there any other way? Do we really have to go through such painful times? There are parts of our report that come as a result of pressure and fill us with a sense of grief. We've made the difficult decision to look at ceasing publishing Life and Work. We've brought our joint report on assisted dying that we discussed yesterday. We've also been through a prioritization exercise where we've had to let go a number of our faith action staff. Painful choices, painful moments. We're bringing a deliverance today about the ceasing of the assistant ministers scheme in its current form, a scheme that enabled us to provide employment for our ministers who had completed their training, but due to the system of vacancies during mission planning, there were no charges to apply to. Our original plan was to stop the scheme at the end of September, but as FAPLT, part of our commitment to the church is to listen. As such, we've heard that there is a need for the scheme to continue for another short duration, and so we're proposing extending it for a final 3 months until the end of 2025. The scheme was to provide help until there was a reasonable opportunity of securing a charge. As presbytery plans are implemented, there are more charges becoming available. 5 have become available in the last week. With this, we want to assure the Assembly that we will continue to journey with and support all of our assistant ministers. But the nature of this support needs to be different. I want us to learn from Jesus how he coped with this Gethsemane moment. We see that he didn't feel able to meet these challenges alone. He took his 3 trusted disciples, Peter, James, and John, with him and said to them, "Sit here while I pray." Why? What would any of them be able to do for him? The obvious answer is nothing. But the request highlights that there are times where others won't be able to save us from our time of trial, but just being there with us gives us comfort and strength. In this moment for us as a church, we need one another. Jesus' trusted friends failed him. They fell asleep on the job. The fact is, they were exhausted from sorrow, and so were having their own personal Gethsemane moments. So it has been for many in our church. Feeling lost for what was and grieving for changes we've had to navigate has left many feeling exhausted and sorrowful. This has proved to be particularly so for those who serve in ministries across our church. We're trying to minister to others whilst we ourselves need ministered to. We're trying to be wounded healers in our Gethsemane moment. This was the heart behind our first ever National Ministers' Conference in February. We gathered with over half of our full-time serving ministers for a day of worship, prayer and encouragement. We were reminded on that day that we're not alone. Not only are we in this together, but God is with us. As FAPLT, we are indebted to the General Trustees and the Assembly Trustees for sponsoring the event. And our hope is that next time we'll be able to organise a similar event open to a broader extent of ministries. Building on the blessing of our National Ministers' Conference, we've had tentative discussions around the possibility of a National Day of Prayer for our church. A day where churches throughout Scotland, the UK, Europe and beyond will be invited to come together and share in a time of worship and waiting on God. Gethsemane is a dark place, but I'm pleased to inform you as a General Assembly, those here in the hall and those online, that I've seen some light in the darkness. Over the last 18 months, I've visited 10 of our presbyteries for roadshows in partnership with Seeds for Growth. We gathered for a time of worship and prayer and encouragement, and at each of our roadshows there was a tangible sense of the presence of God among us and His blessing upon us. The theme for these times was strength for today, hope for tomorrow. And I'm thankful to report from feedback we received that this was the experience of many. At each presbytery, I took time to express my and our sincere thanks as a church to those who were in the room. I did so because there are a number of empty seats in all of our churches from those who didn't return after COVID or since we engaged in mission planning. We have all felt the pain of this. And so I'd like to take a moment to reiterate the same point here today. Thank you. Thank you for being here. The fact you're still loving, serving and blessing Christ through your local church and presbytery is something we do not take for granted. Another light in the darkness has been our vivid vision, a dream of what could be 3 years in the future. The struggles of our recent past are behind us, and we're responding to a new season of life and growth in our churches and denomination. Such has been the shift that local and national newspapers are running with stories of the surprising turnaround in the affairs of the church, locally and nationally. I wonder, what future could you and I dream of as we look to God and rely on Him in greater ways? The vivid vision isn't an ending of itself. Our heart as our presbyteries and congregations will use it as a conversation starter. Another light is the apprenticeship route. As a result of the decision of last year's General Assembly, we've had 21 registrations of interest and 12 formal applications. I want to thank our people and training team for the exemplary work in getting this over the line, an exciting development for our church. There are other lights we're seeing, but time doesn't permit me to speak about new worshipping communities, church planting, church revitalization, the quiet revival amongst youth and young adults, and the fact that all presbytery plans have now been agreed. I'm so glad to mention as well the Good News Project, a new national campaign for our entire church to engage with. It would require collaboration across the church, the focus being to remind us that we're people of good news and to remind our communities that we're still here and we have good news to share with them and to show them. Commissioners, having given most of my time today to the Gethsemane moment, allow me to bring my speech to a conclusion by reminding us that Jesus moved out of Gethsemane. Whilst greater challenges awaited him, I'm absolutely convinced that greater blessings await us. So allow me to reiterate the words of Jesus as he departs Gethsemane with one major change. Moments after being strengthened by an angel, Jesus speaks to his 3 trusted but tired friends. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. In a different translation, get up, let's get going, my betrayer is here. Church of Scotland, I want to issue a call, a cry to you today that it's time to get up. It's time for us to move forward, not to meet our betrayer and death, but to meet our risen Saviour and the future he has for us. I am absolutely convinced that there are better and brighter days ahead for our church, but we will only see them if we get up and get going and move forward with what God has called us to do. Jesus would say to us all here today, get up, move forward with me, my future awaits you. Moderator, I present the report, and as I'm not a commissioner, I invite the clerk to move the deliverances.
I so move. Seconded.
Thank you, convener. We turn now to questions to the convener. Now, at the beginning, these are general questions on the report as a whole, and really to do with things that maybe do not appear in the deliverance, because in the when we turn to the deliverance, you'll get the chance to ask questions on the particular sections of the deliverance and to make comment. But if there are any questions on the report as a whole, now is the time to ask. And at the moment, there are none. So let's go to receive the report. So that's approved in the hall and online. Section 2. We've got one question from Barbara. Sushanik Seitz.
Barbara Suchanek Seitz, number 98. Thank you, moderator. If it's any consolation to you, even the undertakers or the funeral directors call me Reverend Barbara.
I'm offering, we've got Christian names. We use our Christian names. That's the important thing.
My question to the convener is this. We have discussed painful cuts yesterday, and in light of this, can the committee give us or give the Assembly the cost of the video, and how do they evaluate the efficiency of this video? I'd be grateful for a number. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. I appreciate that. The cost of producing the Vivid Vision was £8,000. We went to 3 different companies with the idea, and we're pleased that the best people who submitted the best price were those who we chose to go with. So it was £8,000. We have a conference session tomorrow around the Vivid Vision, and our hope is that the whole church will run with it, use it as a conversation starter. And I'm also pleased to let you know that for the voices on the Vivid Vision, they provided their services for free. So we're thankful to our actor and actress, Jonathan and Karen. Thank you.
Thanks, convener. There are no other questions or comments. So, section 2, do we approve? Approved in the hall, approved online. Turning to section 3, we have 2 amendments. So the first in the name of Alistair Cumming. I'll ask the clerk to read it.
That's not the correct one, guys. It needs to be 8. It's the other one, please. Thank you very much. This is in the name of the vice convener of FAPLT, simply it's FAPLT, so it's also the convener, but the convener's not a commissioner. So this is to insert the words, after the words Assistant Minister Scheme, add and extend the scheme to the 31st of December 2025, and then delete and.
Okay, so this is what Tommy referenced in his speech. So this is obviously has the approval of FAPLT. Does it have the approval of the General Assembly? Yep. It says on here 2025.
2025.
Moderator, I think the Commissioner is looking at the wrong motion.
Sorted. Excellent. Okay. So we have approved that amendment. The second amendment comes in the name of Brian Kerr.
Thank you, Moderator. So after local deployment, add, especially where such opportunities may be helpful in supporting congregations and clusters of congregations working towards fulfilment of the presbytery mission plan, and where at least one of the congregations involved is entitled to a vacancy allowance to be used as part funding, and instruct FAPLT to make short-term finance available to presbyteries to fund such posts to 31st December 2026.
Is this seconded? Excellent. Brian.
Thank you, Moderator. Brian Kerr, 212. I'm really grateful to the team at FAPLT for discussing this so openly with us. The Presbytery of Forth Valley and Clydesdale had a debate on the situation around assistant ministers, and our hope that we can continue to support them as they move forward to look for vacant charges. This is a short-term solution that still ends the Assistant Minister programme, but allows presbyteries to identify local opportunities which might be helpful for Assistant Ministers to serve. It might not be the place where they're currently serving, but it might well be a need that the presbytery, or a neighbouring presbytery indeed, might have to allow the skills and gifts and talents of our Assistant Ministers to remain within the life of the church in this time. Nothing that this does or seeks to do stops assistant ministers from applying for vacant charges. In fact, that's the aim. This is not a handcuff motion. It doesn't mean that they have to stay here or do anything. In fact, quite the opposite. We would encourage them to continue to discern their call. However, we're not in normal times right now. The number of vacant charges that are accepting applications right now is still really quite low compared to where we need it to be in order for movement to happen. We give thanks to God that a number of assistant ministers have secured calls to vacant charges, but we also need to remember that that's a process that we're going on alongside mission planning. This will hopefully allow a little bit of breathing space, the skills to be used in a presbytery area, and for the assistant ministers to continue to discern where their call to serve might be on a more long-term basis. So, Moderator, I move this amendment in my name, and as I say, I'm grateful for the engagement that we had with FAPLT over crafting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Given that you've had engagement with FAPLT, is FAPLT willing to accept it? Excellent. We have a question. Ben Thorpe.
Ben Thorpe, 174. Just really a very quick question. I'm broadly in favour. I was just wanting to double check, based on what we passed yesterday, whether or not congregations that are currently going through the process of adjustment are actually ever going to be entitled to a vacancy allowance, because my understanding was they wouldn't have permission to call, and therefore they wouldn't have a vacancy allowance. But I might have that wrong. Thanks.
Convener.
Thank you for the question, Ben. Churches that have permission to call will be in receipt of vacancy allowance.
Thank you. The convener is willing to accept this. I have notice of two comments, Robbie Hamilton and Andrew Haddo. I mean, is there anything that you have to add to this debate, given that it's being accepted by the convener? No? Okay, so that was a no from Andrew. Robbie's coming to the mic.
Sorry, Moderator. I just wanted to make Robbie Hamilton 127 a comment as a presbytery clerk to say that I've welcomed the engagement of FAPLT on this matter. For a number of weeks, conversations to bring what Brian has brought to the General Assembly. But I'd also like to thank Assistant Ministers. This scheme came in to help Assistant Ministers and support them. But let's not forget that this scheme has supported vacant congregations in difficult times. And that's why I wanted to speak. I want to say that I've got 6 assistant ministers whose help has been invaluable in the Presbytery of Clyde, and I wanted that to be noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. So we vote firstly for the amendment. Approved in the hall and online, and then for section 3 as amended. So approved both in the hall and online. There's no question. I'm not seeing a question. From David Cameron, sorry. My apologies.
David Cameron, 252. Question not necessary as a committee listening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to section 4. Okay, no questions, no requests to speak. Do we approve section 4? So approved in both the hall and online.
Registered a question. I thought I might have registered it 3 times, actually.
Oh dear.
May I have a question on that section?
Always in order, Eileen.
I think it's important. I want to, first of all, say my name, Eileen Miller, 257. Apologies, my iPad seemed to say that I had registered it, but obviously I haven't. I'm Pastoral Coordinator for Fife Presbytery. I welcome this report, and I'm very glad that it will form a baseline for future studies on ministerial wellbeing. My question is on 2.3.8, which says 1/3 of ministers do not take off a whole day per week, and only 62% reported taking their full annual leave. So my question is, why is it only 1 day off per week that's mentioned in this survey? Because doesn't the Church of Scotland recommend 2 days off per week? And I wanted to make that point because if there is a future study, I think it might be important. I know in these times it's difficult to get time off, but it seems that it's really important. And the reasons that it's important is that for every human person to have time off, it recreates them. It's time to recreate them. It helps them to cope with the stresses of ministry, and it's a good role model for those that they're caring for. So my question is, why 1 day when Church of Scotland, as far as I'm aware, recommends 2 days off per week?
Thank you, Eileen. Convener?
Thank you, Eileen, for the question and raising something that's very important. We absolutely encourage ministers and all involved in the ministries across the church to take 2 days off. One of the reasons why the question was formed in the way it was is that we're aware that a number of ministers don't take 1 day off. So it was to start at the base level, but I want to assure you that through all the work that we do, and especially through our people and training group, that we encourage ministers to take 2 full days off, not only ministers, but any involved in the ministries of our church. Thank you.
So we have approved section 4. We turn to section 5. There are no requests to speak. Do we approve? Approved both in the hall and online. Section 6. So we have a question from Terry Peterson and then comments from Paul Middleton and Stuart Cutler. Terry.
Terry Peterson, 134. I was wondering if you could please define sacrificial commitment and what exactly we are expected to sacrifice and what evidence of such sacrifice will be assessed when thinking about the competence of a minister after their first 5 years.
Thank you for the question, Terry. our desire is to be a biblical people where we're encouraged to be living sacrifices. And often in the ministries of our church, that means putting Christ and his kingdom first, then other people second, and often ourselves third. We've just had a question about the importance of days off and time off. So we would encourage that every person in this hall will engage in sacrificial service. But that's a very personal thing, just depending on what stage of life we're at, what stage of ministry we're at. And so we would encourage people to have a sense of discernment in their own heart. But could I also encourage the Assembly that we actually be looking out for one another, and if we see that one of our colleagues is maybe sacrificing too much, that we have a gentle word with them in terms of pastoral care and support. So difficult for me to give a conclusive answer, because I think this is a very personal thing in terms of what sacrifices we sense God is inviting us to make.
Thank you, Convener. Paul Middleton.
Thank you, Moderator. 416, Paul Middleton. When I'm asked what contributions I made to General Assembly this year, it will be standing orders and competency frameworks, and nothing screams late middle age more than that. Moderator, I don't normally speak on issues to do with parish ministry because I've not been a parish minister for about 20 or so years. But perhaps from a slightly outside perspective, I do want to just raise a couple of concerns. And I know the details of this will come next year, which is why I'm just making a kind of neutral concern. Competency frameworks in other walks of life, including higher education, usually come into play when things are going wrong and can indeed lead to dismissal. And that means that competency frameworks have to be precise and measurable, so that there's something very clear to measure folk against. And as I'm very actually grateful to the previous questioner, quite a lot of this very long competency framework is quite imprecise, and I think it would be very difficult, particularly if we were getting into situations where there were difficulties and people were being measured against it. It would be quite difficult to measure folk against quite a lot of those competencies. And the second point I would make is, again, in these extreme situations where folk are, again, being measured perhaps with the outcome that might lead to termination, there has to be support put in place. I mean, you can't just sack people for being incompetent or not measuring up to a competency framework without putting support in place in order to help people to make up the shortfall. And of course, in these times, I would be wondering what kind of support would be put in place in order to help people meet these. These are coming for detailed proposals next year, so I don't really expect an answer just now unless you have anything to add. But I would just urge the committee to be mindful of how this might be used and making sure support is put in place, and perhaps some of these competencies might be adjusted to make them perhaps more precise and more measurable. Thank you, Moderator.
It was a comment, but do you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you, Paul, for the comment. We'll take what you've said on board in relation to shaping what we bring next year, looking at maybe a more concise competence framework. The issues around that for us are that it be somewhat aspirational and inspirational. We're especially giving focus to the first 5 years in terms of ongoing professional development, but we're also encouraging ministries across the church to never stop learning. And we'll feed all of that back into the report that we'll bring next year. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stuart Cutler.
Moderator Cutler 208. I want to begin by saying I wholeheartedly support a competency framework. I think it's a great idea. I've recently trained as a supervisor for students and spent the last wee while supervising a student who tells me regularly that she's a joy, and she is, so I know how helpful a competency framework can be. It helps us to ensure that we do the job that we're supposed to. Last night, I submitted a dissertation for a Masters in Contemporary Christian Leadership at 10:03. Those who know me will be astonished it was quite so far ahead of the 12 o'clock deadline. We all put at the end of these things that we will disseminate our results. I didn't think that would happen the day after I had submitted. In my research, I spoke to 5 ministers, all of whom have significant experience in and out of the parish, and I asked them about their understanding of leadership, given that that's what the Church of Scotland expects of them. It says Full-time ordained ministers have a particular role and function in offering leadership and vision to the church in a changing missional context. Significant to this role is enabling the discipleship of others to exercise their own ministry as part of the people of God. So the first thing I asked these 5 ministers was, did your training prepare you for your role? They all laughed and then said no. I'm glad that training for candidates has changed and it continues to evolve. We need to train ministers who are theologians, not to train theologians who we then send out to do a job that we're totally unprepared for and under-resourced for, and then wonder why they struggle. If you brought a competency framework to anyone who trained before the current system and suggested they were not meeting levels of competence in any of these areas, they could quite legitimately ask the things that Paul just highlighted. How do you know that I'm not competent? And how has the church enabled me to meet these competencies? The short answer is we don't, and it hasn't. There's no compulsory continuing professional development for ministers beyond safeguarding, and there's no appraisal process. It's great to hear that congregations are going to have an ongoing mission plan. I wonder how ministers will be resourced to facilitate that process. It's great to hear that the mission plan is going full steam ahead, even though there's been absolutely no training offered by the church for ministers in change management. My 3-year master's programme cost £3,600. Thankfully, I didn't have to pay that. But 5 years of study leave would pay for 1 year of that programme. It's great to hear that we're taking the well-being of ministers seriously and offering pastoral supervision, but until we skill them for the job that we ask them to do and support them in that properly, then we're doing nothing more than paying lip service to that well-being. So I'm delighted that there's going to be a competency framework, but until it comes with proper training for ministers beyond their first 5 years and an appraisal system is in place for ministers, then it's nothing more than an aspiration.
Thank you, Convener. Do you wish to comment? No. So we move to Section 6. Do we approve? Oh, sorry, Terry's asked her question. Section 6. Approved in the hall. Approved online. Section 7. There are no requests to speak. Approved in the hall. Oh, Tommy.
If I could just make the most of this moment, one of the things that we're trying as a leadership team to cultivate is a right approach to gratitude and saying thank you. And I'd just like to take on the note of Deliverance 7 to take a moment to thank the Reverend Mike Goss for his partnering with us in the work of FAPLT. He was part of the Ministries Council, he was then part of the Faith Nurture Forum, and Mike's experience and his knowledge and his wisdom, don't quote me on that, that's what he told me to say, then was very, very much appreciated. And I just wanted, from FAPLT, to put on record our gratitude and our indebtedness to the Reverend Mike Goss. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So we approve Section 7. That's a yes in the hall and a yes online.